Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast, Elevating Microsoft 365 Managed Services. I'm your host, Microsoft MVP and former MSP owner, Nick Cavalancia. And I'm joined today by strategic partner manager at Martello, Jean-François Piot, better known as Jeff. Jeff, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me here. Very happy to discuss with you about that topic.
Glad you're here as well, Jeff. So the topic today is about the fact that those of you that are in the audience today, you're an MSP, you're offering some level of services around Microsoft 365. We're going to talk a little bit about what some of those levels might look like in today's webcast, but you're trying to figure out, how do I elevate my offering? You're trying to figure out ways to differentiate your own business, figure out ways to create a more predictable and therefore profitable business model where you can add on services so you increase your exposure into existing customers and allow yourself an opportunity to grow out into other customer bases as well. And Microsoft 365 is obviously a great opportunity, but the question kind of becomes, where do you go beyond, let's say, just licensing and doing installations of clients and maybe doing a little bit of management of users and get all the way up to where you're really focusing on the end-to-end service delivery, meaning from the endpoint of the client all the way to Microsoft 365 and everything in between. And that's really our focus today. And now today's webcast, couple of housekeeping notes before we jump into the actual presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. You'll be sent out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording if you happen to miss some of it, or you'd like to share with a colleague or replay it as you deem appropriate. The other thing here also is this is a more conversational kind of formatted webcast. So rather than this being 70 slides in just 30 minutes, one of those kind of death by PowerPoint presentations, you've all been on those. This is a very short number of slides. I think we've got a total of maybe like 10 slides for the entire hour or so that we have together. So a portion of this will be a conversation between Jeff and myself. And so if you find that the slides are not advancing, that's probably okay. If we're just doing some talking, the slides up there more, I want you to think of it as a visual indicator of what we're talking about and not so much exactly the focus. And because this is a conversationally kind of formatted webcast, I do have the Q&A box here open in front of me pretty much all the time during the webcast. So while we will have formal Q&A at the end of the webcast, as always, I do want you to keep in mind that there's also the opportunity for you to put in comments, questions, anecdotes, thoughts, whatever it is whatever strikes you while we're doing our discussions today, and pop that into the Q&A box. We'll be happy to include you in on today's discussion. So the place where we're going to start here is just looking at the context around your business, meaning what defines your business. And I came up with kind of three aspects here. They're going to define what your business context look like, and then we're going to kind of apply this a little bit to Microsoft 365. The first thing, of course, is your customers, who you choose to do business with. Most MSPs seem to target certain specific industry verticals. Maybe it's a certain kind of size of customer, ones that utilize a certain application. You've probably found a niche market, certainly, again, with those industry verticals like maybe just legal or just healthcare, those kinds of issues as well. So everyone's got sort of this specific customer base, and that customer base has a very specific need set in there. So that becomes kind of one of the defining factors around what it is you're going to offer, whether it's Office 365 or Microsoft 365 or any other aspect of your service offerings. The customer that you have does make a difference. The second part that's here is the services that you're offering. And so the services there, really define how you're going to generate revenue. It defines what you can do for the customer, how much they're leaning on you versus maybe needing to go outside your business to find maybe someone else who can provide a service they need. Because obviously, if they have the need and you're not meeting it, they've got to meet that need somehow. And that's bad. We all know that's bad. You want to provide everything and be a one-stop shop for your customer here. And then the last part here kind of goes back to the bench of text that you have and the tool sets that you have, meaning the software solutions that you have. And when you think about this context here is really going to come into play when we talk about elevating Microsoft 365, because your customers have a need today. They need Microsoft 365. As a matter of fact, Microsoft has spent a lot of time, energy, money, et cetera, invested in trying to make that a real digital workplace to allow your customers, for the most part, with the exception of maybe some proprietary industry-specific types of applications and that sort of thing, they've tried to make Microsoft 365 be a complete digital workplace for them to get their business done. So your customers can work solely there in every application that exists there and so on. They're providing you an opportunity for your service to do that. But then the idea is your bench of tools, as you'll see in a moment here, is a little limited when you're trying to go beyond just, all right, I can connect you to Microsoft 365. I can install, the Office client on your Windows machines. I can make sure that you have the right licensing. But beyond that, there's not exactly the right tool set for you. So the context of your business really does kind of come into play when we're thinking about Microsoft 365. And so what I'd like to do is kind of jump into looking at what your Microsoft 365 service model might look like, keeping kind of an idea of these contextual elements involved here. But for most of you, I'm going to guess that you're looking something like this I have sort of three tiers I'm going to show on this screen here. This is the first one. You're doing some or all of this. You might be doing some migrations. Maybe you're not. Maybe just simply help people with greenfield installations of Microsoft 365. Some of you might help with some onboarding of users, certainly some ongoing support around clients and aspects of that where they're having issues, licensing, provisioning, and then maybe some basic monitoring to make sure that the services are running. You can get that for free. Microsoft has their own, for example, Twitter feed that covers Microsoft Services Health and that sort of thing. So some of you are kind of in this category. Then the next level includes everything in the first category, but then includes one or more of maybe some ongoing management where you're actually looking to see things like, do I have the right licenses assigned to the right users? Do we make sure we deprovisioned users? That kind of ongoing management kind of stuff. Maybe some data protection around backing up Microsoft 365 data. There's an ability not to get everything, but you can certainly get most of it. Certainly things like Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive for Business and so on. Those things can be all protected currently today. DR in terms of being able to recover it as well, and then probably adding on some cybersecurity services. And then so those are kind of, it doesn't have to fit exactly in this model, but you might be somewhere in one of these two tiers. And the third one takes everything that's in the first and the second, but adds on top of that where you're really now starting to look at things like more of a proactive nature by monitoring end-to-end service delivery, trying to maintain levels of service. So there's service level management. You maybe even have in your service level agreement something that we call an experience level agreement. It's something where you're actually catering to the somewhat of like the subjective user experience of the users rather than just whether or not the service is running or not. It's how well is the customer able to utilize the service, maybe even some public cloud management and that sort of thing here. And so what I want to do first, Jeff, I've got a couple of questions for you that I want to talk to you about on this. But before we do that, I have a poll for all of you in the audience. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to put this poll up here on the screen. I'm going to push this out to the screen. You can go ahead and interact with the screen there right in front of you, with your mouse, I'm presuming, unless you have a touch screen, then go ahead that way as well. And I'm just wondering which one of these actually best kind of represents what your business model looks like. So, go ahead and interact with the screen, put that in here. Is it tier one? Is it that basic kind of provisioning, migration, support, that sort of thing? Go ahead and interact with the screen that way. Tier two is everything in tier one, plus that data protection, the disaster recovery, some cybersecurity. And then tier three is everything in tier one, which of course, tier two, which of course includes tier one, plus maybe like the service delivery management. And Jeff, while we're waiting for the answer, based on your experience with both partners that are doing business with you and the partners that are maybe prospectively thinking of doing business with you, what would you expect to see as maybe the top answer here?
Well, I would really think that tier one and tier two would be the top one, probably tier one for sure. But again, it can be surprising because of the kind of shift that is happening right now in the client needs. So maybe you will be surprised that more and more people are developing a tier three. That's basically the people we are talking to a lot these days.
I'm expecting to see mostly tier two, only because most of the MSPs that I'm talking to are doing one or more of what I see in the second level there. They might be doing the data protection aspect. They might be focused on the cybersecurity. They might be doing both. But it just sort of depends here. Leopold actually mentioned that there's some MSPs, some MSP vendors are also in the process of integrating Microsoft 365 into their dashboards. And then also he's saying Microsoft has their own project he's mentioning called Lighthouse, which so MSPs can switch tenants to be able to connect their customers to connect to their customers Microsoft 365 tenant. So there's obviously some development going on there. So that's a great point there, Leopold. I'm glad you're pointing that in there. Thank you much. So let's go ahead and close out the poll. It looks like I've got, I don't know, 79% of you have voted, and let's just see what the results look like. And as I suspected, it's mostly
you're right.
There's a nice quarter of you that are doing some service delivery, which is what we're really going to talk a lot about today, is service delivery management. But it looks like the majority of you, about 73% of you, are not doing anything along those lines. But we want to talk about how do you sort of elevate this service model that you have so that you can get all the way to providing the best level of service you can for your customers. Jeff, you surprised then? I think you were kind of leaning more towards tier one. Are you surprised that it's tier two?
Yeah, well, no, well, I'm not that surprised, but no, it's interesting. It's interesting because, yes, as you say, there's more than 70% that have not started to develop that service delivery management around Microsoft 365. But there's still a good portion that are in tier two. So it's a very interesting result.
Yep. So let me close that out here. And so, Jeff, some of the questions I'm thinking about when we think about this growing the Microsoft 365 model. Let's start with where MSPs are today. Are you seeing them offer very similar services to one another? I mean, in terms of they're not really differentiating, or what are you seeing with those that are coming to you and talking to you?
Well, it really varies. It really depends on the size of their customer. What we've seen is that a lot of MSPs that are working with very small customer and really the SMB, they tend to offer like a very wide spectrum of services. Like basically they are the IT of their customer for a lot of them. So they don't necessarily go deep into the Microsoft 365 offering, but their offering is like the cloud and the 365 and the on-prem and the network and the device and etc. etc. So I've seen that a lot with a lot of these MSPs. And on the other side, the very large one have a very often very focused MSP managed services on particular technology. So that can be on Microsoft 365, on cloud, on backup. But so really the difference is, for me, what I see is really depending on the size of the final customer in terms of how wide the offering is. But if we consider how deep it is, mostly what we've seen is the deployment, the user request, the support. I mean, it's, as you say, it's mostly the first tier and the second tier. So what has changed really is we've seen last year a bit of change because I mean, we've seen that more and more of their customers were asking for more reliability of the service. So we start to see really more and more being interested in developing a third tier of services.
So what are your most mature MSP partners? What are they doing to grow that offering? I mean, is it just tier three? Is it as simple as that to differentiate themselves? Obviously, the our MSP audience here could differentiate themselves with some of those things like cybersecurity and data protection, because not everyone's doing that today. Case in point, we had over half of you doing it to some degree. Obviously, we didn't kind of dig down into which of those you are offering, but there's still a fair portion of you that are still in tier one as well. But what are your most mature MSPs doing to differentiate themselves and grow their offering?
Well, they really target their offering to the customer needs. So, I mean, you can do 1 and 3. You don't necessarily have to do second, for example. You can do a basic migration, onboarding, etc., and then continue that service into a recurring service delivery management for Microsoft 365. That's something also you can do. What the most mature that we've seen, they are the largest one, and yes, so they are developing that third tier. What they try really to do is what they want to do is to have their offering being more sticky to the customer. It's to integrate their process with the processes of the customer. And really what really happening is more like it's not only about managing a services, it's to work together with the customer IT in order to deliver value to the business. So there's that, and of course what we've seen is that while providing end-to-end service delivery, they also basically they're also a trust advisor on every cloud project optimization that the customer has. And I mean, with what happened last year, like everybody shifted in the cloud, and so it has been very important and a significant way to improve business and margin for them.
It's interesting. You mentioned the word value and delivering value. And I've always found that, value is something that is subjective to the customer, and it certainly is something that has to be perceived by the customer. And one of the challenges for you in the audience is, my guess is, if you think about the services that you have in that second tier, particularly around data protection, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity, those are, I'm not trying to minimize them, because I actually talk about cybersecurity and business continuity quite a bit, so I find them to be very important. But they almost seem like insurance policies from the customer perspective, because if your cybersecurity is working, right, they never have an attack, they never experience any downtime, that sort of thing. And if you have a disaster recovery that gets them back up and running very quickly, but they never actually have a disaster event, well, then that too isn't seen. And so it's interesting, Jeff, when you're talking about delivering value, how this third tier, talking about service level management and then service delivery, that's something that is sort of very visible from the standpoint of, the old standard. For those in the audience that have been doing IT as long as I have, I've been in this for 28 years. And the old adage, like when the internet came down, was like, oh, the internet's down. The internet's not down. How do you know? You're a user in accounting. You have no clue, right? Yeah, it's one of those things where it's slow. But the idea is that they have a perception. The pain is felt. So the issue of service delivery is very visible. And if that's something that you can do something about for your customers, then you are delivering a lot of value to them, because they're realizing that you are taking care of those problems, because they see and feel them all the time, almost by, like, that's the nature of the user, as it were. Now, one of the challenges for doing this, I'm going to jump gears here, Jeff, and go to the next slide, is the fact that you've got to have visibility into what's going on in order to try to deliver some of that value. Now, there are parts of Microsoft 365 that you do have visibility into, like the user accounts that exist, and which accounts have been created, who's been provisioned, that kind of thing. The licensing, how whether you've got E1, E3, E5 licensing, who's been assigned to, those kinds of things. If they've been signed more than one license, all of that. Who's got installations, what machines have they installed on? So you do have some visibility, and that's where things like the management, the licensing, those kinds of issues can all be done as a service. You can offer that. But some of the stuff that really is missing is that end-to-end service delivery, and then that issue of user experience, because it kind of looks like this. This is where your visibility looks like. The end-to-end service delivery is really ensuring that everything that goes in between the endpoint that the user is sitting on, which could literally be their own personal device at their home, let's say going in through a VPN to the office, running through and routing through the corporate network, as it were, your customer's network, exiting somewhere, going through an ISP, connecting, traversing the internet, eventually getting to the Microsoft cloud and into the Microsoft 365 servers, and then there's the services on those and delivering the services. Everything that's involved in that path that I just laid out is end to end. And the idea is, if you could somehow have visibility into all of that, you'd be able to provide that service delivery as a service and try to maintain that, to know where the problems lie and then try to fix those. Today, as it stands, pretty much it's more along the lines of Outlook isn't working. And then all you can do is go to like Microsoft's Twitter feed and go, oh, Exchange is down. If you can even find that out. And if you find that out that Exchange is not down, you're not exactly sure what the problem is. It could actually be a problem with like authenticating into Azure AD or something along those lines, and you just don't know. And then the user experience there, the reason why that is important is, in a lot of cases, the end-to-end service delivery is kind of proactive. You're watching to see what's going on and hopefully try to fix it before it impacts a user. But the user experience is there as your feedback loop to figure out if something actually is being experienced by that user. If there is a real problem, and then you try to go back and figure out where the root cause of that is and see if you can try to rectify that. So, so Jeff, let's do this. Let's talk about a little bit why visibility should matter to the audience. So, from your perspective, why is that important that they should have sort of this entire visibility across all of Microsoft 365?
But the thing is, if you want to act on something, you need to perceive. You need to perceive what's going on. And the problem, as you explain, is that, I mean, if you want to manage user, fine, you have the Microsoft 365 portal or other tool, but it exists. Like, you have something to see what's going on when you manage licensing. When you do install, deployment, usually you do an assessment of the existing network and infrastructure. You have information, so you can act on it, and that's fine. The problem with end-to-end service delivery and user experience is that what information do you have about user experience? The information you have is basically, for most of the people, is basically just the feedback that a user can provide by opening an IT ticket eventually when he has an issue with Office 365. The problem is, user, especially for SaaS applications, they really rarely open tickets for that, especially when an application is slow. I mean, when it's done, you get angry enough to open a ticket. When it's slow, you basically you find workaround, you complain, you're not happy, you report to your boss or your colleague, or you try to fix your laptop yourself. But the problem is that the MSP doesn't have this information. So there's no tool provided by Microsoft other than the end user to tell you that you have a performance issue there, or in any offices, or even at home. So that's kind of difficult for an MSP, but also for large IT enterprise that kind of act like internal MSP, to understand what is the service quality that is really delivered to the end user. And when you want to go on a tier 3, when you want to ensure a service delivery, if you don't have a view on the actual quality of the service that you deliver and that your customer is paying for, it's kind of difficult. So that's really important. The end-to-end part, it's also very difficult, mostly because it's plenty of information coming from multiple teams, multiple tools. And if you want to ensure service delivery, you need to have a view on everything that can affect that service. So you have many monitoring tools, or maybe you have a network monitoring tool that does most of it. And but the problem is, you always lack the end user experience. And when you have too many monitoring tools, the problem is, how do you correlate this information? So again, to be able to have visibility on the end-to-end service delivery and the end user experience is really something that is kind of difficult right now without the proper tooling. And I hope
I like the comment you made about end to end, including really kind of multiple teams. If we're talking about an enterprise environment, which I'm going to guess for most of you in the audience, you might have some large customers, but they're not necessarily an enterprise with multiple teams unless you're tailoring your services to handle a certain aspect of their IT. But if you're covering all of their IT, you are the team. But in an enterprise, you'd have multiple teams. You'd have the networking team that's responsible for the infrastructure. You might have a security team that's responsible for the VPN. You might have an endpoint services team that's responsible for managing all the endpoints that are out in the field. And and the idea goes on and on. There's lots of different people, lots of different players, and they each have their own solutions to manage, monitor, automate, alert, whatever, around their aspect of the connectivity. But realistically, for those of you in the audience, you're thinking about, I am the one in charge. I am in charge to make sure that user, wherever they happen to be sitting, can connect all the way to Microsoft 365 and have a great experience doing it. And so that end-to-end does become important. I want to talk about that a little bit more, Jeff. So let's dive a little bit into what end-to-end means. And so I'm thinking about, you have a number of MSP partners that are already doing this. So how are the most successful MSPs looking at service delivery and service level management through this lens of end-to-end service delivery?
Well, what they try to do, and that they are successfully are doing, is to gather all the information about components that can affect the service delivery into a single pane of glass, let's say that this way, that correlate the information and that enable this information to be shared with the customer or across the different team they have. Because you said, I mean, to have Microsoft Teams or Exchange working, you need what? You need sometimes VPN to work, MPLS to work, your local LAN, your Wi-Fi, your router, your ISP, your DNS, your notification, your security. I mean, there's so many things that are needed. And so for the MSP, it's kind of complex because you're like, okay, if I want to ensure the service delivery, I need to have a view on most of it. And if I don't have a view on some of it, I need to be able to work with the customer to have this view. And then it's something kind of complex. So in order to have that, you need to basically switch and as well have your customer a bit switch from IT silo to really business services, and then gather service by service all the information you need to ensure that service delivery. So what they do is that, I mean, the successful, of course, is the one that we work with, and that they can handle that because they have this single pane of glass that they can share with their customer. Then they can work on a better service delivery with them. The other very important point is the ITSM part. Again, it depends on the size of the end customer. Some have ITSM processes and tooling and the service desk and etc. Some have not. But anyway, when you do the IT service management, at the end, it's very important to be able to integrate your processes as an MSP with the one of your customer. And again, because at the end, it's exactly the same that when you are in a big company and you have IT silo, the purpose is to have them work together to deliver value for the business. And when they don't have all these many teams, and when they are a smaller company, the silo is between your team and the customer team. And the purpose is to have them work together in order, again, for the business to have a continuous and reliable services.
Now, I completely agree here. There's a tremendous amount of value that exists in being able to accomplish that, and it gets past those, even if it's conceptual teams, which may not exist at, for those in the audience, some of your clients, they may not really exist that way, but yeah, there's certainly at least those aspects of the network of the environment that you have to overcome. But the idea is if you switch your Microsoft 365 services to include service level management, there's a lot of sort of benefits of doing so. And there's some value to your business. Now, the interesting part about this, to add on to what you said, Jeff, first off is I'm assuming that most of you in the audience, if not all of you, have already heard about sort of the shared responsibility model. It's been out for many, many years, but as the cloud grew in maturity over the last 10 years, we've heard about this more and more. And basically, if you haven't heard about it, it more or less means that the cloud providers go, there's a shared responsibility here. We're responsible for, it depends on what the service is. In the case of Microsoft 365, they're responsible for the infrastructure. They're responsible for providing the service and application platform, for making sure that services stay up and running, that sort of thing. But then you, or really your customers, but in this case it's you, are responsible for populating it, creating user accounts, putting the data in there, technically the configuration of the security, that is, in terms of who has what rights to access to which data, not the underlying security models, but the actual use type of security, backing up the data, that kind of thing. So there's a shared responsibility model, despite the fact that your customers see just solely you as being responsible for the whole thing. And that is really, I think, the challenge here. And so the reliance has obviously changed for customers to where now they're relying on Microsoft 365 a whole lot more as part of, in some cases, for some of your customers, completely how they do business. There's others of you where there are proprietary applications and things like that where it isn't just all Microsoft 365. But some of you, that's all you need. You need that, and they build a website and they fulfill orders, and maybe they have a credit card running, some kind of credit card scanner somewhere that runs credit cards or whatever the case is. But they're using Microsoft 365 as the most of it. And so because their reliance is on there, the expectation has. It used to be that the question was, is it running? And you can get that answer. It's a yes or no. It's really simple. It's binary. If it doesn't provide a whole lot of context, it doesn't provide a whole lot of value. It's just yes, it is, or no, it isn't. But what's changed now is it's really now more about how well is it running. And this is where the service level management comes into play and where it really differentiates your business. Because without this, you're on the left side of this spectrum, if you will. You basically can tell your customer, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And it's reactive. It's after the customer's already had a problem. And it's just basically whether or not Microsoft tells you yes or no, something the customer can go do themselves. You're really not providing a whole lot of value other than taking the burden off their hands. But over on the right, when we're talking about how well is it running, we start adding service level management in with user experience. That Jeff talked about in the last slide. And we end up having an ability, and Jeff's going to show a little bit about how to accomplish this. There's an ability now to actually get some context around how well something is running and whether or not the user is having, for example, I'm getting a lot of, what was that? What'd you say? I can't hear you in Teams meetings, right? A lot of breakup in an audio, or maybe the video isn't working properly. Or maybe there's some specific, the download speeds from SharePoint are incredibly slow. I mean, those very specific things like that go on that right side of the spectrum about how well is it operating. Not just that it's up, because Microsoft will say Teams is working because technically it is up. SharePoint is working because technically it is up, but it's not working very well. And so your customer's still having an issue, and they're still going back to that second bullet I've got on this slide. They see you as being responsible. And that's where offering service level management services kind of comes into play here. So it does a couple things. It's going to elevate your offering because now you're able to not just provide the service, but have an ability to provide the service well. Proactively understand if there are issues that may impact users, do something to maybe rectify it. If it's something that you can modify that's within your control, things like connectivity or infrastructure within the customer's environment, those kinds of things. Or if it's something you can't control, like it's purely Microsoft and they're having a problem, you can at least inform people. At least they know. Looks like Microsoft having a problem. So when you come in today and you see that Outlook is running really slow, we're already aware of it. Yeah, and that helps cut down on your costs of people just inundating your service desk with support calls saying Outlook's slow, Outlook's slow, Outlook's slow, Outlook's. Yeah, we know that. But your tech still had to take time to answer those calls and answer those tickets. Nobody wants to do that. So it elevates your offering, differentiate your services, because as you can see, I think it was only, let me go back to the poll, I think it was 17 or 18% of you were, 27% of you were doing something in that third service tier. So there's definitely the majority of you are not doing this kind of service at all. And then on top of that, it's going to make your customer certainly happier because they know that you're on top of things. So the customer who's paying your bill is happier because they see that you definitely are knowing what's going on. You're communicating with their customer base. You're seeing the problem before it happens, that kind of thing. But also in cases where you can rectify the situation because you're able to figure out where the problem is. Oh, you know what? It's the Cisco switch in their Manhattan office or whatever the case is. It makes them more productive and therefore more profitable as a customer. And then the last thing here is this same levels of technology can apply beyond Microsoft 365. So that way you can apply it to cloud-based services, other ones like, let's see if it's just Azure or something else. And I think Jess can talk about this a little bit, as well as on-prem services, because you can also be monitoring the same thing with on-prem services. So Jeff, the question I want you to kind of add on to this is, what are some of the other benefits that you see that our MSP audience should be thinking about by doing Microsoft 365 service level management?
Yeah, well, I just want to add on your outage, Microsoft outage example. We had the case recently. I mean, there are outage from here or there, and one of the MSP we are working on. I mean, we're discussing with him, and it was kind of very happy because it was one of the moments where he can actually show the result of service management, because it's a bit like what you said before. I mean, when you do well your work, then everything is fine, or most of the thing is fine. You fix the issue before releasing the affect the business, and so mostly everything is fine. When there is a Microsoft outage, you can do anything. At the end, it will be done. But the way you can handle that when you have service management in place and the proper tool is really different, because when you have that visibility, you know that a Microsoft outage is happening way before Microsoft. So you can really alert your customer that there is a Microsoft outage that is coming up, that is actually right now, that Microsoft hasn't announced it yet, but you can already talk to your customer and find some workaround, announce the problem, and really show at that moment really a big value. So that's really one example that happens from time to time, and where it's really efficient and really valuable as well. to be able to have this kind of tool. Otherwise, I mean, the service level management or this kind of tier services, they're great because usually they make the offering more sticky. So what you have is a bit what you said is that you have happier customer. Great. When you have happier customer, usually they want to stay with you. So you have a better recurring revenue. Also, you can do that as well because if you integrate again your processes with their processes, it's again increase the stickiness of basically your partnership. They are not your customer anymore. They are your partner. You work together in order to support the Microsoft 365 service for the business line. And that's really something that is very interesting when you develop that kind of approach on the market.
Great points. Let's do this. I'm gonna sum things up, and I know you've got a couple of slides I think will help provide a bit more context in terms of how our audience can actually do this.
How are we doing that?
Yeah, exactly. Because we've been talking about this sort of, conceptually more than practically. So the goal here, of course, for all of you in the audience is you're trying to get to elevated. How do I elevate those services? You want to differentiate what you have today. The reality is that Microsoft doesn't do a lot to help. There was the comment earlier about like Project Lighthouse and providing some value to MSPs so that you can get to different tenants within Microsoft 365. So they're helping that way. But the reality is, in order to get to elevated, if you want to provide, even if it's cybersecurity services, you need to have better visibility into what's going on inside of Microsoft 365. When we're talking about end-to-end service delivery, again, you have to have visibility into the services themselves, into the connectivity that goes between the end user and the services, all of the different infrastructure, all the different security the platforms that are in the way, everything involved. You have to have visibility into that. Microsoft really isn't helping you there, and that's why that challenge of visibility actually is the issue you've got to address first. And so the idea around things like the data protection, the cybersecurity, all those kinds of things, they are extremely good choices of places to start. The way I wrote it here in the bullet, you see they're valid but obvious choices, meaning it's not that everyone's doing it, because even as indicated by our poll today, not everybody is doing those kinds of services, and you may be doing just one or more of those services in tier 2. But the idea is that there's still the obvious places to go. If you're trying to figure out where to differentiate your services against the tier 1s or even the tier 2s of the world, as we've sort of defined it for the sake of this webcast today, the idea is the end-to-end service level management is where you're going to go next. And just again, to keep that in mind, that we're talking really about both Microsoft 365 and we're talking about the remainder of the cloud and even some on-prem as well. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to hand the floor to you. And I know that I've got the slides, but you go ahead and do the talking. And but I'm going to hand the floor to you to talk a little bit about how our audience might do some of this service level management.
Yeah, okay, very good. So like, what do we provide and how do we work with MSP for them basically to provide that? So what we provide is a set of tools that really enable the visibility on the overall end-to-end service delivery of the Microsoft 365 offering. So we talk about that, and the visibility on everything that can affect the service from the Microsoft data center and beyond, because we have the information from Microsoft Portal as well, to the end user. And for that, you need different things. The first things you need is what we have here is digital experience monitoring, meaning you need a way to test the Office 365 service 24/7. It's very important to be able to test it 24/7 because basically half of the issues happen at night. They happen when nobody is working. They happen because there is an automatic patch, there has been a change in the DNS, there has been plenty of things that happen and during off hours and that directly have impact when people go back to work or when people connect at 8 a.m. in the morning. So the 24/7 testing is extremely important. If you want to ensure the service reliability and service delivery. So that's the first part. The second part that we provide is the statistics on what was the quality of the service for the end user. So here it's what we call the real user monitoring. What's important here is to be able to understand where the problem comes from. Is it mostly when you have problem with an user? Is it mostly problem coming from their ISP, for example? Is it mostly problem coming from their network, home network, for example, or corporate network? Is it mostly problem with the bandwidth and etc. or the audio? So basically what we do is that we collect this the information that you can find as well in the Microsoft Call Quality Dashboard, but we use them to be able to monitor the service quality. So, and that's a big difference because basically the security is just a reporting tool. Here we really collect and use this information for monitoring purposes. When you have a 24/7 scientific test and the ability to see if user per user, if you had some issue, what you can do after that is to correlate this information into basically our main UI, our main dashboard that's called IQ, and that enable you to really have a view on, yes, the testing 24/7, yes, the end user service quality, and as well your own network monitoring tool or your own infrastructure monitoring tool. It can be Nagios, can be SCOM, it can be whatever you use in order to monitor the different parts that are important in the cloud delivery services. And you can correlate all this information into business services. So into boards that are business service oriented, in order to first to connect that to your ITSM or the ITSM of the customer, in order to not to have 100,000 alerts each time, but you have defined service incidents that you can really act on and understand. And so that's the first point. And to have as well dashboard that you can share, as I explained before, can share either with other people of your team in order to basically decrease the mean time to repair, to act faster when there is an issue, or to share at a different level with your customer if they want to see globally what is the service delivery quality in different countries, for example, or if they need to want some justification on the return on investment of Microsoft 365, etc. So you make them happier by giving them visibility on some things they absolutely don't have right now. So that's basically the set of tools that we provide that are connected all together into our single pane of glass that really enable this true service delivery management for Microsoft 365. Maybe you can go on the next slide. The next one is really about, so it's kind of a sum up. So the value really for the customer, it's great because basically it ensures business continuity. So that's what they want. They want a reliable tool, reliable Microsoft 365 services, because at the end what they want is business continuity, and we know how important it has been, and it will still be over, forever now. Of course, when you provide this kind of service for your customer, they have less issue, and when they have an issue, they have less impact on their business, and that's something very valuable for them. And at the end, all of that really improve and justify the return on investment on the Microsoft 365 deployment that they have done. So it's really something that is of high value for the customer, and that of course is of high value for you as well, because first you differentiate your service with people that cannot do that. Because you have the information that you can share, and you have information on the issue right away. You don't have to wait for user to finally be angry with you. You reduce your support cost and your mean time to repair. And as Nick, you were saying, when you have that kind of visibility, you can easily extend that to other cloud applications, and we'll see that in a minute. But so quickly, maybe a quick use case. We are we are working with Rapid Circle, that is a managed service provider, and they had a big year last year, like probably a lot of them, like they moved 300,000 users on Teams, and so that's a lot of work. And of course, when you move people on Teams, you need to make sure that they will have a good end user experience, and when they are on Teams, you absolutely want your user to have the best possible, again, user experience, because you want them to renew your service. So they came to us because they were finding that the traditional MSP tools or network tool was really lacking of, and basically all that part about the end user experience. So they could not really position themselves as kind of an expert that will discover this kind of issue and that will fix this issue even before they affect the business. So they start to discuss with us. They implemented our tools, and now really they are very happy first, and they have done a case study with us that you can find on our website. What they find out is that by using that, so of course now they have a better positioning, not only on Office 365 but also on other cloud management projects. But coming back to Office 365, they've seen that the performance on average of the service has been up to 30% more. Their MTTR has been down by 25%. The user satisfaction that they pull regularly has been increased by 20%, and the productivity of the employee by 25%. So it's really a great result. Again, you can find that on our website, and it's something that really, when you are able to have that visibility and provide really that service management to your customer, it's really valuable for them. So maybe the next one, and we'll be almost finished here. So here, it's really quickly on the left side is basically the offering I was telling you about. So the being able to proactively monitor Office 365, the outage of Microsoft, we spoke about that before, the integration with the ITSM, etc. But this kind, as Nick said, this kind of offering is you can easily extend it to other cloud applications, especially in the Microsoft world, because you can connect our tool to Azure, for example, or AWS or Google, and basically now you can have a single pane of glass that enable you to create business services not only for Microsoft 365 but for applications that sit on public cloud, and again do that service management for your customer. So that's basically what's about the next slide, with another use case that we had. So maybe you can switch on this one. Yeah. So the value for your customer, I mean, you can imagine what it is. I mean, it's of course when you provide this kind of service delivery management on cloud application, again, they have a better reliability. It's critical for the business, again, in order for business continuity, and really it makes the user more satisfied of their IT. And for you, again, it's increase your stickiness with your customer. And that's a bit the use case we have that also you can find on our website with Visma, that is a big SaaS provider that also provide managed services. They have 1 million customers. So it's really a big one. And so they provide managed services for cloud application. And in order to do that, they use our tool to consolidate the data from App Dynamics, for example, Azure, AWS, Google, all in that single pane of glass, and they connect that to their ITSM to be more reactive in order to and to create this kind of business services in order to ensure the best possible way the service delivery to the end user. And so for them, it's great because they have a better support. They really reduce their MTTR, the mean time to repair, and at the end they find a way to deliver a better service while optimizing their costs. So this whole offering is more sticky to their customer, and that's why they are. I mean, we really like to work with them. So maybe it's the end right now. Yep.
I was muted there. Sorry about that. Yes, we do have a couple of questions that have come in. Actually, if you've got other questions while we're talking, please put those in. We've got about 12 minutes left. We'll be happy to take as many questions as come in. Leopold has kind of a couple of different thoughts and questions kind of built in. So I'm going to try to see if I can do my best to work through these and mention all the things he's got. He says, first, I do not see that the PC itself is not being monitored and managed. I'm not sure what that means, Leopold, but we'll keep going. Maybe you can clarify that a little bit. So second, if there's an issue with an ISP, yes, maybe it can be pointed out that the ISP is a problem, but most of the time we can't do anything about the issue since it's at the ISP, which is valid. Same thing with Microsoft services, but we'll talk about that. Maybe you can talk about, oh, that's perfect. Leopold's asking what has to be installed on the clients. We'll get there in a minute. And he's saying, assuming I have like a Fortinet firewall, etc., this kind of tool needs to point out that the issue is at the firewall level, thinking about this, how are you connecting to the firewall or the internal switches, and how's data getting to you? And I'm going to kind of generalize this question to kind of sum it up, Jeff, a little bit. He's talking about a couple things. Talking about, let's say, on the endpoint itself, on the PC for the users. Talk about maybe the problem could be at an ISP. Maybe the problem is with a piece of infrastructure, whether it's the firewall or it's a router or it's a switch or something. Can you talk a little bit generally, but try to touch on those specifics so that we're answering Leopold's question around, how would you detect that there's a problem at an endpoint? How would you detect that there's a problem with the ISP? How would you detect that there's a problem with a piece of infrastructure? And then what can you do about it? What information can you provide the MSP audience so they can do something about it?
So yes, it's a very good question. So first is so for example the ISP or the endpoint. It's two different questions. With the ISP, there's something that can be done that is interesting. So first, you have our probe. So our 24/7 tests, they run with what we call robot user. It's probe. It's not a probe that you will install on every user laptop. It's more a probe that you will install in strategic places, in location of your user, to give you really the baseline of the service quality 24/7. On top of that, you have the statistics coming from the real user monitoring, and there you can find each time someone is doing a call or something like that, you have the information of the ISP. You have the information of the round-trip time, of the packet loss, of the bandwidth, and all of that. So what you can do in order to detect an ISP with a problem is that what we do is that we group user by ISP, and then when you have a certain percentage of the population on that ISPs that reach a certain level, then you start to have a very good view on, is it the problem likely to be the ISP or not? So that's the way to do that. It's to group everybody by type of ISP that you have, and then apply this kind of ratio in order to understand if you have like 30% of the user that are running, I don't know which ISP, AT&T, that start to have an issue when all the other using other ISP don't have any, then you know that you are likely to have an issue with AT&T. So that's the moment where you can dig here. What we want to do is like provide you enough information for you to be able to find easily the root cause. But when you cannot aggregate the data this way, then basically you're blind. So the other point is, how do you want to, if you want to have like information at the device level? So again, at the device level, there's no magic. Either you have, you need to install something on the device, on every device, and you have to manage that. You have to make sure it's always updated and all of that. So, I mean, it can be possible, but it's not the way we have chosen. Or you can get the information directly from Microsoft that basically is getting that information each time someone is doing a call. So what we do again here is that we collect and use this information for monitoring purposes. And so when we can know really at the end user level, or not if that device has a problem with Windows right now, but what we can do is we can know is basically the end user network information, so packet loss, round-trip time, bandwidth. We can know if there is a problem with the audio, for example, audio set, for example. Is the audio set responsible for a low service quality on Teams, for example? So we can have, again, enough information for you to be able to act on it. So there doesn't exist to have 100% visibility without having 100% of user with a probe or something that needs to be installed and maintained on it. But what we want to provide you with is enough information without having the burden to have to install all of it and maintain it. And that we can. Also, to finish to answer, like, oh yeah, but if it's anything else in the route to the cloud components. So what we do with enterprise and what we do with MSPs is, again, we have that what we call a hypervisor. So yeah, in English, it's not exactly the same, but it's a way to connect our dashboarding tool to every network and infrastructure monitoring tool that you can have to monitor the infrastructure of your customer. So here, and to be able to correlate this information with the testing of Office 365, with the real user information coming from Microsoft. You can correlate that into line of service. And so when you have something that is a firewall that is broken or anything like that, you see immediately on the same tool that also tests the service continuity for Microsoft 365. So you can really correlate this information.
Yeah, I like the way that you put some of that. The fact that you've got some synthetic transactions. You talked about the probes, the bots that would exist that are providing sort of a representation of what, let's say, an office or a subset of users on a particular subnet or network or type of connectivity would experience. Then you've got that real user monitoring that layers on top of that, that's showing real good things like call quality, and that helps give some real insight into a specific user rather than just something that represents a bunch of users. And then the service level on top of that, offering the visibility down into not just Microsoft services, but even services related to the office and hardware and infrastructure. Back to Leopold's question about things like the firewall, or is it the ISP? There are ways to at least tell and come up with the root cause. And the thing that Leopold, your question earlier, just about the fact that, well, if it's the ISP, what am I supposed to do? I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I think I was inferring from your question. I think that's what you meant. Is we all know that as an MSP, one of the things that you want to make sure your customer sees is that you're doing something about a problem. You're trying to work on it. And if all you ever were to do is to go, it's not me, and you shrug your shoulders and put your hands up and go, it must be the ISP, obviously they're like, and why do I have you? Why am I paying you all this money? That kind of thing. And at least then if you go, I've isolated the root cause and we've put a call into the ISP, we've told them what we found. We noticed that the other locations of your business, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, are not having issues because they go through a different ISP. This is the only one. So we're talking to them about it. We're trying to, and then back to, I think something you had mentioned earlier, Jeff, about the mean time to resolution. Getting that MTTR down is one of the things that's really, I think, the big benefit here as well. Another question came in from Tevin, and Tevin said, you mentioned 3 different kinds of monitoring. I've talked about 3, and then also I know when you had that slide, there were 3 kinds mentioned there. He said, are those one product? Are they 3 products? And then how are they priced?
So that's a very good question. So it's a package of products that communicate with each other. So let's say we can say it's one package. In terms of install, you will have 2 different. One for the probe. But this one, again, you need to install a probe at your customer. You can use cloud probe as well if you want, but I mean, a cloud probe will test the cloud from the cloud, so it will test the tenant, but not really the service delivery where the location of the customer is. So that's why usually our MSPs do a combination between a cloud robot and on-premises robot. So you have this one, and the second one is our what is called Martello IQ, and that basically collect the data from the first one and collect the data from the Microsoft CQD and collect the data from SCOM or PRTG or Nagios or whatever you use in order to correlate all this information and provide you with that single pane of glass. So that's basically what it is. So we sell that as a package because we think that if you want to ensure, again, if you want to build that third tier of service, you need both products. You need that way to measure 24/7, and you need a way to correlate this information with the information you already have. So we sell that package at a price per user. The list price is $5 a user a year. And then, of course, we have a specific MSP program and specific condition to align to your business.
Excellent. It looks like we are at the top of the hour. So if any of you are still typing questions, feel free to put those back in the Q&A box. Someone from Martello will definitely reach out to you directly and make sure that your question gets answered. Jeff, thank you for a great conversation today. I think this was really good in terms of just at least talking about and allowing our audience to focus for an hour on the issue of how do I elevate my Microsoft 365 services and 365 services, excuse me, and then do it in a way that actually provides some value both to the MSP and to their customer as well. So appreciate your input. Thank you a lot for the conversation today.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for doing that with me. I mean, your input are always very valuable as well. So it was really a pleasure. We can do that another time, anytime you want.
I'm sure we can. Everyone in the audience, thanks a lot for your participation today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments as well. Do appreciate you being here. This is going to conclude today's webcast. So thanks a lot, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye.